Have you ever really looked at the back of a $1 bill? I mean, all those weird symbols, that floating eye, the pyramid, the Latin everywhere. What does it all actually mean? Well, today we're going to peel back the layers on Washington, D.C. and some iconic American symbols to explore the occult myths and legends that are hiding in plain sight.
Right? This one little piece of paper is at the very heart of so many theories. Is it just money, or is it a secret roadmap left behind by the Founding Fathers? A guide to secret societies and ancient conspiracies? We're going to dive into some of the biggest claims and see where the evidence actually takes us.
And there's really no better place to kick things off than with one of the most shocking accusations you'll ever hear. The idea that the Freemasons, an organization that was super instrumental in building the nation's capital, has a secret link to Lucifer. Yeah, it's a pretty heavy charge, so let's break this down carefully.
This is the question. It's the one that fuels so much of the controversy. For centuries, people have been trying to connect the Masons to devil worship. But to really get to the bottom of this claim and to see where it completely falls apart, we have to start with the name itself.
You see, long before Lucifer was the name for the devil, it was just a word with a beautiful meaning. It comes from two Latin words, lux, which means light, and fere, which means to bring. It was literally the Roman name for the planet Venus, the light bringer that you see in the sky right before sunrise. So how in the world did a name for a planet become a synonym for pure evil?
Well, it all comes down to a specific Bible translation. The original Hebrew text was actually talking about a human king of Babylon, and it was mocking him for his fall from power. But when the Bible was translated into Latin, the word Lucifer was used to poetically call him the fallen morning star. Then, much later, the super-influential King James Version of 1611 just kept that Latin name. And over the centuries, people started mixing up the story of this fallen king with the story of Satan's fall from heaven. It was basically a giant, centuries-long misunderstanding.
And then you have this. This quote is supposed to be the smoking gun. Albert Pike was a huge figure in 19th century Freemasonry, and this statement, supposedly from him, seems like the ultimate proof. It's been used for over 100 years to paint the entire organization as satanic. But there is a massive problem with this piece of evidence.
So, here's the twist. The quote, it's a complete and total fake. It was just made up in the 1890s by a French writer named Leo Taxil. This guy ran an elaborate, years-long hoax just to make the Freemasons look bad. He invented all these wild stories and fake quotes, and this one was his biggest hit. And get this, in 1897, Taxil held a press conference to publicly admit he'd made the whole thing up. And yet the quote still gets passed around today. It just goes to show you how powerful a good story can be, even when it's been completely debunked.
That journey from a simple word to this super sinister symbol is actually a perfect way to get into our next subject. Because just like the name Lucifer, the all-seeing eye, that thing floating above the pyramid on the dollar bill, has a history that's way different from the myth. So where did it really come from?
The popular myth, right, frames this thing as the ultimate symbol of some shadowy group watching our every move. But the historical reality, it's a lot less spooky. For centuries, the Eye of Providence was a pretty common symbol in Christian art, representing God's omniscience. You'd often see it inside a triangle to symbolize the Holy Trinity. The Freemasons didn't even start using it until 1797, long after it was already an established Christian symbol.
And this right here is a perfect example of how a symbol's meaning is never set in stone. On the left, you've got the original Great Seal, which was meant to represent divine guidance for the new American nation. But on the right, that's the logo for a very real post-9/11 government surveillance program. When DARPA rolled this out in 2002, people freaked out. The context had completely changed. People didn't see divine guidance anymore. They saw Big Brother. It proves that what a symbol means really depends on who's using it and when.
Okay, so now that we know where the eye came from, let's zoom in on the Great Seal itself. The conspiracy theories make it sound like it was created as part of some secret Masonic master plan, but the real design process was, anything but secret. Or streamlined.
This iconic design wasn't just handed down from some secret meeting. It was the messy result of a long bureaucratic process. It took 3 different committees and 14 guys over 6 years to finally land on this design. I mean, can you imagine them arguing over colors and symbols, pulling ideas from ancient art, Christian tradition, all trying to create a national symbol from scratch? It wasn't a conspiracy. It was designed by committee. Now here's the kicker. When you actually dig into who was on that committee, the whole Masonic connection just evaporates. Out of the 14 men involved, only one, Benjamin Franklin, was a Mason, and his design idea was totally rejected anyway. The person most responsible for the final version we see on the dollar bill was Charles Thompson, the Secretary of Congress, and he was not a Mason. In that spooky-sounding motto, Novus Ordo Seclorum, it's a quote from the Roman poet Virgil that just means a new order of the ages, celebrating the start of the American era, not some sinister New World Order.
But then you see stuff like this, which is a favorite piece of evidence online. The theory goes that if you draw a star over the pyramid and you pick out very specific letters, the A from Annuit, the S from Coeptus, M from Novus, O from Ordo, and N from Seclorum, they spell out Mason. You got to admit, at first glance, that seems a little too perfect to be just a coincidence, right?
Well, here's the thing about anagrams. If you have enough letters to choose from, you can make them spell almost anything you want. It's a classic case of finding a pattern because you're looking for one. There's not a single historical document or note from any of the designers that even hints this was intentional. It's a cool visual trick, for sure, but as actual evidence, it's considered completely unsupported.
All right, moving beyond the dollar bill for a second, there are a few other things often linked to Freemasonry and its supposed secrets. So let's check out two of them, the Seal of Solomon and the famous Masonic cipher. Are these the hidden keys to the whole code? Okay, now this is super important because it causes a ton of confusion. The Seal of Solomon is just another name for the six-pointed star, a symbol of wisdom that you see in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The Key of Solomon, though, is something totally different. It's a grimoire, which is basically a medieval textbook of magic spells and rituals. Despite the name sounding so similar, the sources are crystal clear on this. That book of magic has absolutely nothing to do with mainstream Freemasonry. So what about their secret code? Well, this is it, the Masonic cipher, or as it's often called, the pigpen cipher. It might look mysterious, but it's just a simple substitution cipher, and its purpose wasn't to pass along some ancient dark secrets. It was really to solve a practical problem. See, early Masons weren't supposed to write down the rituals. This cipher was a clever way to jog their memory, letting them keep notes without technically writing them in plain English, which gave them a little bit of privacy from outsiders.
And honestly, it's way simpler than it looks. Let's say you want to write the letter C. You find it in the first grid, inside a square-shaped box. So you just draw a square. Done. If you wanted to write D, you draw that same exact square and just put a dot inside it. Once you see how it works, you realize it wasn't made for some impossible-to-break secrecy, but just to be easy for members to use.
Okay, so we've looked at a fabricated quote. We've traced a famous symbol back to its actual religious roots. And we've decoded the, let's be honest, kind of boring bureaucratic truth behind the Great Seal. After peeling back all these layers, what's the big takeaway?
What it all really shows is that symbols are powerful because their meanings can change. The all-seeing eye started as a symbol of God's watchful eye. Then it became a reminder to be a moral person. And now, a lot of people see it as a sign of sinister surveillance. The real story isn't one of some ancient unbroken conspiracy. It's the story of how our own fears, our own beliefs, and our own times are constantly reshaping the meaning of the world around us.
And that kind of leaves us with one last really big question. Why are we so drawn to these stories of hidden control and secret societies? Maybe it's a way for us to make sense of a world that feels really chaotic. It's the belief that somewhere there's a secret plan or some hidden logic behind it all. So what do you think? In an age where we have all the information in the world at our fingertips, what does our obsession with finding secrets in plain sight really say about our need for a good story?